Welcome everyone, and we've been talking already about this even before we got started. But one thing that we all acknowledge, I think, is that India is really on this journey to being a global powerhouse in a variety of spaces. And one area where everyone's banking on India doing and excelling very well is in the education space. We're really thinking we could become the education hub someday. Uh, and in that, EdTech specifically promises to be very profitable, and um, and it's exciting to have a lot of startups in that space. So, profit apart, there's also the space or the kind of engagement, the kind of the variety that is there, right? You have a lot of homeschooling tech that's coming up. There's a lot of immersive tech that's coming up. There's AR, VR, XR being explored, and we will get to it. But let's not dwell too much on the elephant in the room, which is ChatGPT and AI being what is it going to come in, as far as edtech is concerned. So there's that whole space, right? Of okay, all of this is possible. There's so much that we can do. We can make learning better. We can make the learning ecosystem better. So that's one side. But there's also the projections that we see, in global trends and how the e-learning market itself is sort of slated to grow at an exceedingly high pace. There are different projections, different reports come up with different projections, but there's one which says that there's about $460 billion market by 2026. There's another one which went on to $830 billion by 2030, right? Whatever the numbers be, we're not going to be bargaining on a few billion here and there. But with that also being a promise for edtech, so you've got the richness of what could be done. You have the lucre of it being profitable on the other side. So with all of this in space, the future definitely looks very bright, very exciting to see what is it that's going to come about. And in the midst of all of this, we have the government of India actually stepping in and taking initiative on putting together a policy like the NEP. So much so that the NEP itself has a section about edtech and how technology is intended to be used in the education space. So it looks like a lot of things coming together, and not to mention the pandemic, but let's mention the pandemic. There's just so many things that have seemed to come together, and without shouting out loud, it seems to be indicating edtech, edtech. So here we have all of us. My name is Anand, and I'll be moderating this session. And we'll get to hear from all of you, and we have a fantastic, stellar audience out here who've had immense experience at edtech, building edtech solutions, and chipping away at this futuristic picture of what edtech could be. What we would be talking about today is essentially enabling edtechs to deliver greater value to the education ecosystem. Right? This is sort of the umbrella under which we'd be having our conversations today. And this session per se is going to be very important to edtech entrepreneurs, other stakeholders, folks who are interested in seeing where things go, where the market is going, to keep ensuring whether the market and the movement is inclusive. It's not causing a rift or a further rift in the social space, in the social fabric of India. There's a whole bunch of these aspects, the innovation that is there, and those are the things that we'll be covering, and folks who are interested in that, this particular conversation is going to be quite interesting to them as well. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Namit William de Cruz, the Sales Director, Strategic Digital Natives, Microsoft India, to set the context for today's discussion. Right? Over to you, Namit.
Thank you, Anand. Good morning, everyone. So, introduction already done by Anand. I've been working closely with Microsoft over the past 5 years in what we call a super hot space, digital natives, right? Across different segments, but the digital native business in India. And this is actually out of our blueprint. So if you look at Microsoft globally, there is no digital natives focus. This is something that came about in India 5 years back, something that we've grown, and really the reason why we're doing it is because we see the immense potential and the opportunity ahead of us. So part of that, under that umbrella, edtech has really been a category that has really shone bright in terms of investments, in terms of innovation, disruption of I would say, multiple centuries old model, and really impacted tens of millions of aspiring Indians. I think the question that we will all be discussing is how do we move on from here? What is needed in terms of uh, ripping up the existing playbook that got us here? What are the changes that we need to do to go after the next opportunity? And there is a massive opportunity ahead of us. I think all of us know that. And hopefully those are going to be some of the points that we will discuss together. So high level thoughts at this point, some challenges, could be opportunities depending on how you look at it, that face all of us. One is the percent or the space of the division between the formal workforce and the unorganized sector, right? That's out of a 500 million workforce in India, we have just 10% that is actually formal and organized. The rest is unorganized. So how do we look at that part of the market? And that has a lot of social impact. That has a lot of a multiplier effect. So what do we do to address that market? Two is personalization, and we are seeing this trend not just in edtech, but even if you look at a massive category like e-commerce, right? Today, e-commerce is all about personalization. Anybody who has a significant play is only talking personalization, right? So how is that relevant to edtech? And it'll be very, different in edtech. It would probably be around things like small bite-sized learning packages, a customizable learning path, probably um, um, outcome-based learning, social learning, etc. Right? So that's probably the personalization aspect in an edtech context. And I mean, obviously, I think as Anand mentioned, there are also platform capabilities, right? Traditionally, typically you would look at things like scale, you would look at security. I think those days are gone. Today we need a lot more richer capabilities out of your platform, right? You need to have out of the box AI, ML, Gen AI, blockchain. All of these are table stakes when you're looking at a platform and what it can bring to the table. And of course, I think the big thing here is also going to be the ecosystem, right? And there's a bunch of stuff that needs to be done in terms of working across the board with government, with private sector players like Microsoft, to make sure that we are really addressing at a policy level, at a scale level, at a tools and tech level, as well as a go-to market, right? So, quick summary, Anand, if I have a minute. Uh, Microsoft India, we are fully committed to work with edtech partners here across three main areas. The first is the traditional area of build with, where we can give you our tools, our tech to help you build better products and services and experiences. Two is sell with, right? So for you to really leverage some of our resources, some of our certifications, some of our content, and make it cross monetization. Happy to explore those spaces. And number three is, I feel equally important is around the go-to-market, right? So whether it is a B2B play or whether it is a consumer play, I think Microsoft has enough of muscle in both spaces. We have a consumer business, we have a very strong enterprise business. So willing to work with all the players in this space across these areas. Thanks, Anand.
Splendid. Thank you so much, Naman. And I think with the four areas that you spoke about, I think it's going to cover a good width and breadth of what is it that we need to talk about. So with that, I'll do a quick round of introduction of the speakers that we have here. Um, so we have Mahesh, who's the co-founder of English for India, and he is here along with Arun. Okay. Arun Jagannathan. We have Devam Shah, who's the Chief Information Security Officer of Teachment. We have Swaroop Madhavan, who's the founder and Chief Executive Officer of Parent Off. We have Harsh, who's the HOD at Vedantu. We have Abhisht, who's the founder's office of My Captain. We have Balaji Sampat, who is the co-founder and chief product officer of Aha Guru. and a lot more that we were discussing. We have Dr. Aruna Wadkar, who's the founder and managing director of Harvest Educational Transformation Solutions. We have Krishna Kant, who's the co-founder and head of curriculum R&D of Banzu. We have Rishi Mazumdar, who's the senior edtech specialist at Questlands. We have Rahul Ahuja, who is the founder and CEO of EdGame. We have Satish, who's the CTO of NextGen Edu. And with that, we will get started with a little bit of exploration on some of the things that we had, right? So let's just kick off with you, Naman, right? You get to go for this again. Okay. So the edtech wave, right? A lot of folks believe that it got more powerful, it got a lot of tailwinds in the last few years, right? The pandemic. And the pandemic really seemed to have played a major role in necessitating edtech more than any other thing, really. So now the pandemic's not done, right? But it's dwindling. The effect of it is, would you say that would have a repercussion, or would that create new opportunities for edtech, and how would edtech be able to sustain the momentum there?
I think great question, great opening question, Anand. So the way I look at it is like there are a bunch of industries, right, that really had this massive growth spike during COVID, and whether you look at e-commerce, whether you look at the PC business, even tech players like Microsoft, right, we had a big spike during COVID, where everything had to go remote, and anybody around that who had any value proposition around that premise of remote, right, had a benefit during COVID. So that includes Microsoft today. So I think for all of us, the days of the low-hanging market is over, right? And that's just something that we all have to deal with, right? Because that spike that we saw during COVID, by the way, Microsoft too is facing a bit of a growth slowdown, and we are really looking at how are we going to be relevant for the next phase, right? So I think that's the focus that edtech, that a lot of players need to really have is great. The good thing is that now a lot of concepts that we had to previously sell from a cultural basis, from a mindset basis, I think a lot of those concepts are now mainstream and established. But now it's about looking out for the next phase of growth, and really designing, retooling, reimagining what we can do to make sure that we are there, we are present, and we are part of that next growth story.
Yeah, I agree with that. I see that. I think the pandemic itself had shaken up a lot of our beliefs, right? Things that we had assumed and taken for granted. I think that was shaken up. Now, with the pandemic having done what it had, we shouldn't go back to that same mindset of saying, okay, this is all that can possibly happen, because anything else can. And to look for that. Thank you so much, Namit. So this one's for Swaroop and Rahul. So you both are along with an organization that's chipping at a different facet of edtech itself, right? So there's a lot of talk about immersive learning, right? There's this whole thing about, there's this materials that are just readily accessible. I have a whole bunch of technology that I can use to create simulations. I can create a lot of immersive learning experiences. Now with that up real, and because it is doable as well, it's not just fantasy, right? So this particular trend, do you see this as something that's is just a blip, or do you see that as something that's going to stay? How is it going to affect the way edtech looks at solution creation, learning experience creation?
See, when you really look back at immersive learning, right? I think short answer here, it's going to stay and it's going to flourish.
Okay.
Reason for which is, neurologically speaking, the way the brain develops neurons or makes synaptic nodes or make connections is faster when children play. Now, what immersive learning really does, be it AR, be it VR, be it where Meta, as a company, they called themselves Meta, why that future is that becomes so children can't differentiate between what's real and what's imaginary. Okay, they pretend play.
Sure.
That's how they learn. They see teachers, they come back, they play teacher. They see a doctor, they come back and play doctor. They even probably become interested in a subject because of the teacher. Okay, that's how much already immersive experience happens. Now tech aiding it. So when you make something extremely gamified, learning is no longer a memory or a rote process. It's actually a fun and engaging process. So I definitely believe immersive technologies are going to play long. However, the challenge is going to be the cost. So getting on to how you're going to scale the hardware part here, there is a bit of this hardware-software interaction, a lot more here. It's not purely a software play.
Yeah.
I think the challenge is going to be the entire logistics to the entire global space of how this hardware is going to become affordable over a period of time.
Right.
I think that hasn't broken through yet in the immersive experience.
Yes.
I think software-wise, from 5G to everything, it's ready now. Right? Content abundance is there, honestly, in this space. But device penetration, be it class, I mean, people are still figuring out A/B testing. Even larger companies are pulling back products, right, from Google to everybody, right? They're figuring out what is the right tech model to get here. So, but I definitely see a lot of future because somebody is going to break through.
Got it.
Yeah.
I totally agree with what Swaroop said, and it is the future and it will be there. The only thing I think is, as an edtech industry, is we are the people who are into this ecosystem and we are driving this industry. So we have to crack this tech part and to go much more beyond basic immersive technologies or basic interactive things. These things are coming and this will be there. Children nowadays are much more smarter than it was 10 years back and 15 years back, right? So these are the problem that Swaroop said is very much there. We have to crack those cost thing. It should be accessibility and affordability should be there to make this actual work on the ground level. Otherwise, it will be on air and only the top universities, top people who just have a lot of money to pay for it will be able to access it. But not just, I would say, not just Microsoft or maybe Meta also. We should be taking a front lead to work on a lot of things in immersive learning also. We should not wait for these people of Meta and Microsoft. like they will come with solution. We'll see how to implement this thing. I think we should front lead this thing, and it is more of experimenting. Right? Microsoft must be also launching a lot of things after a lot of iteration and experiments. So we can also, if every founder here is starting that experiment, and meanwhile we can create a good product, and it's like we should focus on B2C first. Then it can be also implemented for B2B also.
Got it.
I feel so.
Yeah. So, and it's not like we wouldn't wait for Microsoft.
Yeah. No, so I just wanted to, and just love the conversation. And actually, let me kind of come in here and also clearly say that don't expect Microsoft to lead, especially in the India context, right? Because Microsoft has a different lens globally, right? So when we are talking about the India context, our challenges are different, unique in some cases. I think probably a lot of the solutions will come from players whose main or probably only business is in the India market, right? So if you look at Flipkart, which is a partner of ours, is actually doing a lot of this. They have Flipkart Labs. They're trying to see how can we flatten 3D images, render it back in 3D form through not a specialized device, through I would say a mid-range smartphone, right? So a lot of this work is happening, and you will definitely see breakthroughs in this space, and probably not from Microsoft, at least not from Microsoft leading a lot of this, because companies like Microsoft, Meta will focus on the top end of the game, right? Where, let's say you have industrial applications, you're doing designing and building, let's say, an airplane or a jet engine, right? Where you will invest these millions of dollars. But there will be a trickle through, and there will be people who are solving for the India context, and they'll probably be amongst us in the room, and you will see it.
Absolutely. And I think just to add to that, right? So there's one thing where the technology per se could be very expensive, But there's also the other thing that a lot of folks and a lot of geographies are actually focusing on is to take the core principle of that technology and make it more accessible and available. Right? If you take the very common example of how you work with the centrifuge, you typically have a centrifuge which will do the separation of the malarial thing to actually identify whether this is, it's been infected or not. And since someone came up with something which was a toy at once upon a time, and then they just use that toy to create the effect of a centrifuge and then be able to give you a little more quick and dirty diagnosis, right? So I think it's also that, right? Yeah. Yes, you could come up with a piece of technology that's fantastic, does it? What's the core principle? Can we realize that core principle through something else? That's also going to be something. So let me put this question to Balaji and Satish, right? And then I'll again come back to the other folks. This is to do with the very commonly discussed, fairly commonly misunderstood aspect of AI. Right? Everyone's talking about ChatGPT, right? Now there's 4 that's come out as well, right? And everyone's saying, oh, this is it, oh my God, we have to change our assessments, we have to change everything that we need to do. That's one reaction. There's another set of reactions where institutes and even publication houses have said it's okay, use ChatGPT, right? Just recently, I think it was yesterday, we had Elsevier and other folks come out and say that's okay, we would admit content created by ChatGPT. So there's a lot of this significant polarization, and there's a lot of confused people in between. What's your take?
Yeah, I think, see, one thing is, yesterday I saw one very interesting post on LinkedIn. Okay? That particular picture was when calculator was introduced, there was a protest by teachers. Okay, this is a very old picture. Okay, so whenever any new technology has come in, and which is kind of quite disruptive, the way, whether it was calculator or whether, as he said, printing was one of the greatest things. ChatGPT also is going to disrupt that market. Okay, and there are people who are saying this is fake, this is inaccurate, this is not going to be useful and all. And there are people who are saying, let's accept it. And that is going to happen. And one point that Namit talked about was the personalization, right? It is today possible to do that personalization.
Yes.
Okay. Earlier it wasn't there because we wanted to do standardization and all that. A kid may be learning very fast, a kid may be learning very slow, or maybe their interests are different. And those things are going to be possible with ChatGPT-like systems. And in fact, we were experimenting one of the things in the career education. I think I spoke to some of the people. We are primarily focused on the career education. How we are using ChatGPT is to figure out, we have some universe of information, okay? But that doesn't answer all the questions of the students or whoever is seeking that information. So that is where we are saying, we will answer your questions within our universe, authoritative and whatever answers. Beyond that, we are integrating it with ChatGPT. So we are now saying, okay, let me go beyond my universe to fulfill the needs of the student. Okay, I think that is what is likely to happen. And I'm sure some of you have seen how Khan Academy did one of the classes recently. It's very interesting. And to add to whatever immersive and personalization part, think of it this way, right? You are teaching a kid about Bernoulli's principle, okay? Today it's not, you just draw one picture and show, okay? But you could get it out of the book, okay? Think of it like simulation. The kid is seeing how things are happening, how speed and pressure are kind of related in fluid dynamics, and then take them to a carburetor design or any of that and show it, okay? And that experience, I think, is going to remain with them forever. Right? That's how I see all these things coming together.
Okay.
Yeah, but I feel that somewhere we assume that edtech is here to stay. We all hope it will stay. Somewhere we make the hope into a reality in our minds. But if you look historically, there have been many rounds of edtechs. Where TV was introduced, people thought that is going to revolutionize education. Did nothing. In 2000s, early 2000s, we had EduComp and we had a whole bunch of people saying computer labs in the school will revolutionize everything. Nothing happened. The point we have to keep in mind is this round of edtech, of course, has probably much more power, hopefully. It can bounce off this radar completely, or it can actually make a lasting impact. And that is not going to come from just the technology. The technology is definitely an enabler. Ultimately, the ed part of tech is going to be super important. The real question parents are going to ask, and teachers are going to ask, and of course, as a country is going to ask overall, people are going to ask, is whether we are doing something and solving a real problem that people are facing.
Exactly.
The technology, whether I'm using a fancy technology, ChatGPT, is it solving a problem is a second question.
What is the problem?
The problem is the issue.
Absolutely.
Correct.
Like, for example, does EdTech today solve? Zoom, for example, was a great technology to use during the pandemic. Are people going to use it now? I don't know. I mean, is it solving a need? Is the real question to focus on as EdTech overall. So to me, the way I look at it is, EdTech has to create an impact, solve a real problem. Understanding that problem, technology can provide its input for that. Today's biggest, I think, the EdTech crisis that is happening, I would like to call it a crisis, because anything that grows so rapidly during 1 or 2 years and then there is a big drop is a crisis situation. Now, this EdTech crisis is really a crisis of show me the impact. You have hyped this up, you have talked about this, you have said so many things about it, but my kids aren't learning any better. And the fact that you can address that crisis, it is not going to come from whether I use a new technology. There is enough amount of technology research is constantly going on everywhere. The point is that the ed part of research is not happening enough. And I feel that what EdTech can do really well on solving an actual education problem, I think that will make EdTech actually make or break.
And I think the question on impact is something that I think we will be visiting down the line. So let's take on this question for Harsh and Devam, right? So we were discussing a lot about things. We jumped into technology. Now let's just take a little step back and ask ourselves what really are the key factors driving the growth of EdTech, right? So when I'm looking at EdTech, and I'm looking at all the facets of the various ways in which EdTech is really being presented. What would you say would be the challenges that the EdTech startups are facing in India?
Okay. Yeah, so I agree with sir. Basically the thing is, what are the driving factor of EdTech? Because before Teachment I was part of Byju's and Great Learning, so I was adding some department in Great Learning. Then it was acquired. So I have spent quite few years in this EdTech sector. And what I have observed is there are two parts, like education and technology. Now in the education, personalization. So one teacher is best, but now we are delivering that quality thing to multiple students. But whether the student is also able to grasp the same thing, all the students have different grasping ability. So there should be some model which can automatically or based on AI ML thing which determine what is the grasping capability of a student, and based on that provide the content in the way. One student has ability to sit for 2 hours, 3 hours and learn whatever it is coming, just absorb everything. But one student has just capacity of absorbing something for 5 minutes, 10 minutes. So we need to personalize the entire thing with the help of the tech, and that is how the EdTech started. And then if I come to the crisis and EdTech challenges, so it is not only EdTech sector, but I think entire startup ecosystem is facing the challenge, and specifically in India. The problem is, I feel one problem is yes, delivering the value, but yes, somehow we were able to deliver the value. We were doing something new. Problem is the valuation.
Cool.
So, yeah.
And just to add to that, before I say it out to you, I'd like you to focus less on the market and the sort of the macroeconomic challenges that are there, but in specific for the EdTech space. But before that, there's one thing that you said, which is very interesting because very commonly people say that. It's like, okay, can I have AI, ML drive this decision making or this? Sometimes I'd like to present it a little differently. If there is no available human input that can be given, can I use AI, ML to provide that? Because sometimes the teacher knows. We are right now dismissing the possibility that a teacher could provide input. And there should be an app or a tool that takes in that, factors that in, and then helps you better.
Yep.
Just wanted to put it up on the table. Yes, go for it.
Okay, so here my perspective is a little different, disagreeing from Balaji sir also and Devam also. So little on a different side. So there are two perspectives. So there is one perspective that there there are 100 children who are being taught, probably who are being taught by edtech or by regular players, offline, online, whatever. Now in those 100 students, the understanding capacity of, say for example, 20 to 30 students are pretty great. But what about the remaining 70? And this is what is being talked about right now here. Now, I means my perspective is that okay, this is 100 students. Let's make their quality education more better. But as what Namit also said, that's only 10%. Rest 900 are sitting without even getting the opportunity of being taught, without even getting the opportunity of getting into that system. Now here, if I talk about tech is something which can do things at scale, mass level. Flipkart did that, Amazon did that, edtech is doing that. Obviously, I don't challenge the quality. I don't comment that okay, it will be of the best quality. What Balaji sir said, ki obviously there might be some basic issues, and that's the issue of a scale. So now when I talk about key factors about the growth, so obviously there are multiple multiple pointers, like digital inclusivity might be one of the factor. But as we are seeing that India is getting into that zone, that everywhere 4G, 5G is coming. Most of the people are having that 4G enabled handsets. Now, next comes the part of teacher. So, even if you just look back 5 years back or 4 years back before the pandemic, at that time, good teachers were holded by very few organizations, like the most reputable one. But right now you can see good teachers in almost every part, because they know digital revolution. They know that I can be on YouTube, I can be a famous teacher. If they are teaching well, YouTube is recognizing and lots of people are actually seeing the potential, and this is actually creating a market for the educators, for the students. More number of teachers, lesser price, students getting a better education at a lesser price, and more affordable, more inclusive.
I think on the conversation on quality itself, I think there's two sets or domains of quality itself, right? There is one quality where am I teaching something wrong? You can't, that is basic hygiene, and that quality has to be assured, and that's sort of what you're saying, right? If in 162 are not even able to get it right, or it's not been laid out correctly, that's one quality. Then there is, for some people it is pedantic, but it's not. It's like, is this how one should learn? Is this the right mental model that is getting formed? There are people who are worrying about that quality also, right? EdTech largely doesn't worry so much about this.
Exactly.
Because there's still a lot of agreement, disagreement on this space. It's like, you people figure out, we are going to keep selling, right?
Exactly.
So, I'm just bringing that onto the table. There are two, there's quality 1, quality 2 that has to be worried about. It's not just one catch-all quality. So here is sort of the question for you, and then I think then we could also go into a demo that you said that you'd like to share, which was how can edtech companies really add greater value, right, to the entire ecosystem, right, rather than just looking at one part of the ecosystem. And I think we're all talking about, oh, there are so much, but what about this, and we've been discussing that. How can edtech folk, the edtech players really add greater value to the entire educational ecosystem? What are your thoughts on that?
Thanks, Anand. So I think lot of topics covered, right? And the way I'm starting to look at this is really looking at it in two parts. So the first part is really around the learner, right? What can we do to impact that experience? And that is all about and a bunch of things already spoken about, right? So there is access, there is affordability, there is language, there is personalization, and all of these things done the right way will hopefully really impact the learner effectiveness and deliver the outcomes that we want to deliver. The second piece of it is around, in a very broad sense, ecosystem building, right? And again, we spoke, a lot of you understand this piece and spoke about it in different ways, right? So the ecosystem building is really around aspects like training, teacher training, and enablement, assessments, the right measurements, certification, partnerships, and making sure that the work that's being done has is being received at a university level by employers, etc. So bunch of partnerships across the ecosystem, and not just focused only on the training, on the content, right? So across everything. And I think, where unique opportunity for edtech players to kind of combine both of this and then add scale, and then there's a very powerful value proposition at a macro level. That's the way I see it.
Awesome. First of all, welcome everyone. I was sitting there and listening to conversations. It's insightful.
So, whatever you share as a trend for future thematic, it all comes back to the one conversation, which is ChatGPT, right? So we talk about industrial metaverse, we talk about green software, we talk about a lot of stuff, edge computing, edge inferencing, but eventually, hey, it's all fine, but tell us more about ChatGPT, right? Now, what we'll do right now for the next, I would say 15 minutes is reflect on where is innovation stands as of today, and how can edtech benefit from this, right? I'm sure, when GPT-4 was announced 3 days back, one name which became very dominantly, which came out as Khan Academy. You mentioned Khan Academy. The question, how are they using it, right? We'll talk about that. But, this is a familiar UI. I thought when we put this up, I thought people will probably take note and sit down. That's why I did that, and it happened, right? Earlier, my slide was this one. People are just, was not really concerned about this, right? So quickly, when I say future is here, yes, we're talking about a thematic. See, when you use ChatGPT today, you're looking at that application. By the way, ChatGPT is an application. All of us agree? It's, if you look at what Sam Altman said, why ChatGPT was built, he said, hey, we released OpenAI base models, which is DaVinci, Ada, Babbage, Curie, 12 months back. Nobody did anything with it, right? We had to show the world what's the true power of generative AI, and they built an application. And hence, everybody took note of it. By the way, another very, very profound statement, I heard this from, again, watching one of the Wall Street Journal interview. AI has been, even AI was spoken in this forum today, but looked very traditional way of thinking. AI right now is becoming a traditional way of looking at how do you apply AI to any, I would say, problem domain we have. So the question asked to the gentleman was, hey, AI has been there for decades. Now, why is world so gung-ho about what we're seeing right now? Right? The answer was, hey, so far AI has been there, but nobody gave a UI to AI. Right? For the first time, we saw an UI on AI, which made us realize the true power of generative AI. That's reality, right? Had it not been for any UI, nobody would have realized what can ChatGPT like application can do, right? So that means we're entering an era called Copilot. That means looking at a digital companion, a student, a teacher, anybody for that matter. We will have co-pilots going forward, which will make us do a job better, make us stay productive, and get things done. Right now, I'll show an example. This is the new Bing. Just checking how many of you have access to new Bing. Have you tried new Bing? Wonderful. Now, this is I was outside and I just asked the question here to the new Bing, saying, "Hey, I'm presenting to EdTech this morning. I need a short summary of 3 firms. Can you help?" It asked me which 3 firms. I said, Parentol, Aha Guru, and Crack Verbal. All 3 are here? Yeah? So it searched independently, and it beautifully comes back and gives me a short summary. Rather than me going and looking for searching the links and going through the links, understanding, 3 short summary for me, right? Whatever is coming here, it's from a website, by the way. Nothing is fictitious. It's all coming from, it's also the citation of it beautifully saying, I got it from these websites, right? What just happened? Instead of me looking for information came my way. This is future. This is how we'll consume content, right? So hence the term, by the way, this is my co-pilot. Trust me on this one, in the last 4 weeks, since I've been using it personally, I must admit that I've used search engine just for links, etc., and data you go and learn. I had to present at one of the forums, and I had to speak about ethics and responsibility when it comes to new technology adoption. There was a brilliant article from World Economic Forum called Ethics by Design. I was, on a regular basis, it would have taken me 30 minutes to get to that link. One search, it gave me a beautiful summary saying, by the way, this is what you should talk about today, and here is a link from World Economic Forum. I went inside the link and learned. It saved me 45 minutes right there, right? So this is how search is getting transformed. So conversation way of looking at things, right? If you should just check it out because it's available. It's publicly available. You can just sign up and you can get this, right? We did announce co-pilots last week, right? So each of these softwares as a starting point will have a co-pilot, right? I'll show a quick demo in terms of how the co-pilot will come in handy. I'll go to Bing itself. I'm not sure how many of you have seen your co-pilot companion in Edge browser. Yeah, any of you checked it out? Yeah. So majority are not. Let me take that. Let me show that to you. Okay. I'm right now in the Edge browser. I just looked up the balance sheet of ICICI Bank, right? So I'm going to show you how we will use the power of Copilot to deal with data itself, right? So here, this is my Copilot. Okay, let's look at the new one. So this is my Copilot in the browser available. Okay, now let's see. I'm browsing this stuff. What do you want to do with it? I say send this. I send the raw text, and it's saying, hey, what do you want to do with the text? I said, just summarize for me, right? So this is the benefit of a companion like this, where rather than you wrangling with data and understanding what is it here, it comes back with a real-time summary on the data. By the way, it's pure raw text, right? It's unstructured. I just selected it and put it here. And it comes back and talks to ICICI Bank, did bank for 5 years, etc. Right? I can also say, hey, by the way, compare this with competitors. It'll go and look up HDFC and SBI and etc. and it'll compare and contrast, right? So I'm showing applications in terms of how as Microsoft we are using generative AI capabilities in our products, right? By the way, the magic is being done by the underlying GPT models. You can build co-pilots in your application. You can build a lot of stuff behind the scenes using the power of GPT, right?
Beautiful practice. That's it. There you go. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Amit. Thank you. Fantastic.
Thank you.
So that was a fantastic demo. I really think it got everyone's juices going, and I could see the whole bunch of questions. And agree, it's an absolutely fascinating space to be in. Forget it for the technology and the way you could actually dovetail various applications into it. The very study of the model itself and how the reasoning engine works is just amazing. One question, of course, that will remain, we will not go into exploring that, is what does that mean then for assessment? Would assessment ever be authentic? Are we losing the capacity for authentic assessments because now I can get anything provided up and ready and dealt out? That's something that we need to still explore and understand. Right? A very old-fashioned, or rather a very simple way to solve it is to say that, well, if I'm asking in a space where there is no technology available, it has to be authentic. There's just no way a child has access to actually generate anything. But we'll come to that later on. And I'd like to look at, right at the outset, we also mentioned that the government, the Ministry of Education, is also putting in a lot of effort and trying to be as forward-thinking, as updating as possible. Right? In its approach, and the NEP is very good. The first NCF that came up has been also absolutely remarkable in how it has balanced a whole range of thought processes and recommendations of what it is. We're still waiting for the other NCFs to come out. But in all of this, many things are going to change. Right? In the 10+2 model, it was largely every grade was taught as if it was writing a board exam. So you'd have the same set of questions, the same kind of questions, everything, right? You could look at any paper, and if you didn't know what was taught in which grade, you'd think that it's all the same. Right? The same fill in the blanks, match the following, true or false, short answer, long answer, so on. But now they're saying it's different. With the 5 + 3 + 3 + 4, they're saying 5 is going to be observation based, 3 is going to be a different kind, the next 3 is going to be a different kind. And the last 4 kind of sort of seems like it won't be touched, but we won't go into that. But if I just look at that, would that mean that now EdTech, which was building for a 10+2, would need to be overhauled? How would it be able to provide for what typically is considered intangible? Thoughts, questions on that? Would like to start?
I'll just go. If you see NEP 2020, it does talk about, from an EdTech lens, it talks about NETF having an education technology forum, having an overall architecture with trendy, where you can do a lot of customization, which is a very important point when you're talking about how it will cater to the new normal, which means the 5+4+3, which means there's a lot more space to do customization in your products. Maybe previous products were a little more from a one-size-fit-all lens, but maybe this customization, this architecture is going to help, where other organizations can also put their products.
Sure.
So I think that's going to be important. But before that, I want to, and it does talk about content and pedagogical standards. It does talk about capacity building at the systems level, so the teachers, it does talk about even parent involvement. But I also want to talk about, when we talk about edtech at scale, there has to be a maturity model. There has to be when we are going away from one size fit all, when we are talking about personalized learning, then I think a person in Nagaland, because we as an organization work across the country and we work with the government schooling system, and if we go there and not everyone is at the same maturity. Maybe a Karnataka, I would say, and Odisha is better than a Karnataka. Might be very strange, but I have been to schools in Odisha, and we also work in Karnataka where a lot of not-for-profits also work. It's just it's full of not-for-profits.
Yeah, and even within a state itself, you can see it vary, the whole spectrum of maturity.
Spectrum. So what is your edtech maturity model in terms of, maybe what is your, in terms of people, systems and processes, in terms of what is that I need as a state? And I'm looking from very systems lens perspective and not talking about as an individual organization. And hence, what is that I can do with what I have right now?
Got it.
And what is the kind of capacity building I need then to enable edtech? And I like enabling edtech. It was written there, but that's what I will leave everyone with. And maybe
got it. Just to add quickly to what you were saying about India, right? I mean, the whole architecture, etc., unquestionably they've kept the API largely for centralizing what would be content sharing and teaching. But with the 5+3+3+4, you need to rethink how you're even going to do something. It's no longer content delivery where 10+2 work with, right? It was, I had to teach, I had to get a content across. But in the first 5 years, it's going to be play-based. We've never done play-based. Delivery of play-based is going to be very different from delivery of content in those years. Assessment of play-based is again going to be very different because it's going to be observation-based evidence collection, which is not the same as me asking you to draw a fish and then saying you didn't draw a proper fish, it looks like something else. It's going to be very different. So I think there's a rethink that is required, and I am afraid India is not doing that. India has come to the point to say that at least I'm going to create something which will centralize and collect and make it easier for people to put in their stuff. But if they're going to be doing the same stuff as they did in the 10+2, that's not the stuff we want in the 5+3+3. You see, that's what I was just trying to put out there. But Krishna, would you want to take that one on?
Yeah, absolutely. So any policy change, right? It can be anything. It can be on any level. Usually gets branded as a new revolution that is happening in the education industry. And according to me, it should reposition itself from being called as a revolution to an incremental change. And a better term for that would be an evolution, right? So as Dr. Balaji rightly mentioned, in the past there have been computers, there have been technologies, or for that matter calculators, and people said that, oh wow, this is going to change everything. But then it did change everything. It's just that it took a very long time for us to realize that, because of the incremental change, and it keeps on evolving one after another. And for the current changes that the NAP is bringing, they're great, right? There are changes in curriculum, there are changes in pedagogy, there are changes in overall administrative and support and assessments, right? The way assessments are, we look at assessment is going to be completely different. Now, we need to put a razor-sharp focus towards what role can technology play here.
Bring me back into the NEP context, right? So in the scope of what the NEP is suggesting, do you see existing edtech products not having to change and still thriving?
So the thing with edtechs is there's only one advice that I would give for everyone who's working in edtech. Adapt. Everything is evolving. And in an ever-growing, ever-evolving environment or surroundings, the only thing that one has to do, even to survive, is to adapt to the change.
No, but there's a difference, right? So when there was, like I said, like play schools was largely an unorganized sector, right? But if you look at now, the first 5 that is being spoken about, there were enough schools which still stuck to the 10+2 model, where they would teach content, get worksheets done, would get question answers done, etc. EdTech catered to that because it is very similar to what they were building for 6, 7, 8 or for 8, 9, 10. So they could do it. On the table here, do we have an EdTech solution that someone can name for Montessori or for the Steiner system? We don't really. The point is that was not a market that was even considered to be something that one had to even explore. But now with the NEP mandating it, all of them are now moving into this. Which means it's no longer a you choose what you want. It's like, wait, the choice has been made. Let's move towards that. And when that is done, you no longer, I as an EdTech, if I had a company which sold, say, grade 1 to 3, which was larger question based and worksheet based and stuff like that, that's not going to sell.
That's great. In fact, just adding one point to that, how are you going to teach drawing to kids? Now, for example, if you go through the NEP syllabus at the crux of it, you have skills. Yeah. Okay. How are you going to teach skills online? Okay. How are you going to teach cycling online? Okay, let me ask a question. You're going to teach balance online with theories of E equals mc squared. Does not work. So I think you're right, because the next level of work that's involved is in how are you going to be able to scale it, even making it accessible and affordable.
So yeah, it should be, I think it should be hybrid model, like it cannot be 100% online. As you correctly mentioned, something is experiential, like you need to experience it. Learning is 5 senses, online is just 2 senses, listening and seeing. So it should be hybrid, where it should be useful when a student is outside or not part of the state, not available in the school due to XYZ reasons, then the course should be available, and then the student should not miss out. But when the student is there, then it should be like in the physical boundary, and then collaborate with other students and then learn from other students, because 80% learning happens from the collaboration, not from what teacher is teaching.
The assessment, when we are talking about as per NEP, and that's the topic, 360 degree of assessment it mentions. So when it is 360 degree of assessment, what are we taking into the consideration of that assessment? So because we have the psychometric assessment, DMIT assessment, so there's so many in the market that is, approaching the schools. So they are so confused that which is the least, they give the thing, we will take that. They won't think whether it is really genuine, whether it is really getting it the outcome. That is where we have
one is the outcome. The next is one thing that most people forget is, okay, what do I do with this?
With this.
Right? I've got it. Something is telling me that you're now a purple color. Now, what does that purple color even mean, and what do I do next is something that's not available to the teachers.
And what are the 2 colors that comes to purple?
That too.
Even that is the minute thing that one has to think in the terms of learning. And then especially when you talk about the skill-based, as you said, it's very importance given right now. Vocational courses, very important, because we don't have any jobs right now in the government or any sector. Even corporates are closing down, because even I worked with corporate. So what I mean to say is, observing all the sectors, it's very important that the EdTech reaches out even to the the corner of schools or the corner of the country or the globe, that where you tell that, but this is what we have brought and this is what it is really going to work out for you. And as he said, experiential learning is somewhat school has to take care, and something that is the technical part or the tech part, that has to be taken separately, because both are equally important. Not only technology will help a child to groom in everything, but at the same time experiential learning, then the skill-based learning, and then the tech, all has to merge together in how we bring in.
And I'll add one thing to that before we move on to something that I'm seeing as a pattern of this in this discussion at least. It's more than the edtech companies or the firms going to schools and saying this is what we have. I really think it's really high time, because the 10+2 is something that we all are the product of, right? and hence we think we know, right? This one is new, and it's significantly different. Teachers, everyone are struggling to even wrap their head around all of these things, right? So I think it's time that the edtech firms actually went out to schools, sat with them, understood what is it that they're trying to do, and then extract patterns to see, wait a second, you're doing this, I can get tech to make it easy for you to do this, so that you can focus on the other things. And then build, and then come up with a final product saying that, this aspect of what you wanted to do in this new setup is something that we have a product for. But one thing that's coming up clearly, right, and I really want to get to this thing, is if there's so many definitions of what could be, then that sort of begs the question of, wait a second, then do we even have a definition of quality? Do we have a definition of what is it that makes our product right? And given that there are so many kinds of edtech products, there might be different sets of sort of, I wouldn't want to call it boundary, but at least some kind of assurance to the end consumer that this much is guaranteed for you. This is something that we'd like to go for. Right now, EdTulna is one such thing that standard they came up with. They tried, and then they're attempting to do that. Adoption is of a different thing. But do we see that for, say, for the administrative products, so things which are helping in the school space? And you mentioned straight out the bat, I'm really happy you picked that up, Sarup, first, with ChatGPT and stuff like that. What about compliance, which might not be such a concern today in India, but if you're looking at international product space, that's definitely going to be a concern.
And that is like one thing I am into security.
Yeah.
So one thing I know, like very soon India is also going to launch big bills. Like civil code is basically getting entirely changed, and data privacy is coming as a basic right.
Absolutely, absolutely. So with all of these things, views, thoughts on, do we need, not a police, not a watchdog, but an agreed upon definition that we all together believe that this is something we have to assure? Or how do we go about it? My issues.
Definitely. I think the UGC is a pretty good model to the way they work with universities. There should be something similar for edutech companies, whether they're dealing with online or virtual modes. There has to be a system or like there is a framework of references for languages which the European Union created. I think there could be something similar for India in terms of even defining what is the level of the product that the companies have been putting out. So definitely that is a requirement right now.
Yeah. Avish, what about you?
There's the other angle of edtech. We've been speaking a lot about the K-12, the 12th, education till 12th class, but there's a larger segment that's building up post or even graduation segment, right? That part, it becomes a challenging system to comply with because your outcomes over there are pretty straightforward defined, right? If you are a person who comes up and says, I'm going to take up your course because I want a job in this field, your outcome is defined.
Yes.
That job is your outcome. So how do you also include such sort of regulatory bodies complying with these sort of expectations also? There's a lot of questions being raised. For example, recently, I'm not going to name the company, but they placed a learner at a company wherein that learner worked at that company for about 60 days, did not get paid at all. And the edtech sort of bowed back by saying that this is not my problem, I got you placed. So these sort of challenges
these things will come into in this case. So that's what I was going to, I'm glad you put it out. I think when you're talking about, that's why I said there will be different set of compliance things required. But if you're talking about placement or you're talking about professional development in at the workspace, it has to be a different kind of thing. Am I leaking stuff? Am I letting your capabilities go out even in their raw state to someone else and they start making a judgment about things? All of those things can concern.
I'm a teacher. I'm not, used to not talking. So it's the first time that I've actually spent 2 hours and I've not opened my mouth. But it's very interesting hearing all of you, right? And I come from a time, maybe a vintage, when it was called education. It wasn't called edtech. Then suddenly someone said, hey, you are an edtech, right? I said, yeah, sure, I'm an edtech. Now, conversation is not even on the education part. They are saying, what is your product? What is your user onboarding? What is your, other metrics? So I think at the core, what we are still doing is we are in education. So English for India, the larger promise is teach English to India, right? I mean, that's as clear as it can be. And what we realize is we have a tech plus touch approach, right? So the tech part is AI. What you see in ChatGPT, the entire CFR framework of the language is already there. I do not need to worry about content. But what I need to worry about is context and confidence, right? I know this sentence. How do I speak this sentence? And if a person responds, how do I have the same confidence to, kind of give an answer back? Those are the kind of things that come when there is a personalization. And I think Namit was talking about the intervention, right? The social interactions that we have, because the 50 million people, out of which you mentioned about 10% are in organized workforce, right? How do we get them to use a co-pilot? How do we use, I'm assuming it's going to come in the vernacular language also, but just how do you get them to adopt it? And that typically we feel will come from personalization, that comes from, some intervention from a human, because there is a human connect. I understand what you say, right? Is something that I think is a key part of it. So coming to, the ChatGPT itself, I think what you said, calculator was for numeracy, what ChatGPT is for literacy, right? So for us in English for India, that's one of the things that we are like, wow, so far technology had this kind of, chasm, this kind of this thing to jump, but with something like this, we are really excited to see how we can, take it and use it.
I just wanted to kind of add to that and some really great conversations. I think all of us know that there is no silver bullet, whether it is ChatGPT or whether it is multilingual or whatever greatest, most shiny technology comes out. It's not a silver bullet, right? There is a lot of real work that needs to be done. That all of you will be doing that work to make it applicable, relevant, accessible, affordable to your target audience. And that is the real work. The technology, the tools, today we have some tools, tomorrow we'll have some new tools, but they're all to aid in this entire journey. And there is no shortcut, there is no silver bullet.
No. And I think, going back to what Namit was saying, I think that's a very important thing to always bear in mind. And I think that's a good closure to this conversation. It's fantastic, right? The amount of things that we saw, what we discussed, the perspectives, extremely valuable. And I think that's all very good takeaway for what it is. And if this is how we are going forward, with all of these things placed in mind, I think EdTech is, and EdTech players per se, I think are positioned in the right way to ensure that the mistakes of the past are not repeated and we do much better going forward. Fantastic. Thank you so much. It was a utter delight talking to you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you for moderating.
Thank you.
Thanks for moderating.
Thank you.